You're home early. That's a problem. Grant Whitmore's voice was calm, but the words landed harder than any argument ever could. Camille Richardson stood frozen in the doorway of their bedroom, still holding the keys to the house they had built together, staring at the man she had loved for 8 years. The man who was supposed to be her safe place. The man who had just looked at her like she was the person who had interrupted his life. She didn't find another woman in their home. She didn't need to. The truth was already sitting on the dresser in front of her. A diamond bracelet she had never seen before. A hotel receipt folded neatly beneath it. And a message glowing on Grant's tablet that she wished she had never read. Last night was perfect. I hate pretending we're just friends. Camille felt something inside her go completely still. Not because she didn't understand what she was seeing. She did. But because a part of her was still waiting for Grant to explain it away. To tell her there was a mistake. To tell her she was wrong. Camille, Grant said, stepping closer. Let me explain. She slowly placed her purse on the chair beside the door. Her hands were steady, even though her heart wasn't. Explain what? She asked quietly. The bracelet? The hotel room? Or the fact that you've been lying to me for months? Grant looked away for a moment. It was only a second, but Camille noticed. She had always noticed the little things. The pauses. The changes in his voice. The moments when he was choosing a story instead of telling the truth. It's not what you think, he said. Camille almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she had heard those words before. Every person who had ever been betrayed had probably heard some version of them. Then tell me what it is, she said. Because I'm standing in my own bedroom, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Grant sighed and ran a hand through his hair. The same gesture that used to make her smile. Tonight, it only reminded her how long she had been ignoring the signs. Madison and I have been working closely together, he said. That's all. Camille looked at him. Working closely for a year. His expression changed. Just slightly. But enough. You went through my things, he asked. And there it was. The shift. Not the betrayal. Not the lie. The accusation. Camille stared at him, realizing how quickly he had turned the conversation away from what he had done and toward what she had discovered. That's what you're worried about, she whispered. Not that I found out. Not that you hurt me. I didn't mean for this to happen, Grant replied. You've been distant, Camille. You've been focused on your company. We barely spend time together anymore. Those words hurt more than she expected, because somewhere deep down, she had feared he would say them, that he would find a way to make his choices her responsibility. Camille had spent years supporting Grant's dreams. She attended his events, moved her schedule around his meetings, celebrated every promotion and every business victory as if they were her own. And somewhere along the way, she had stopped asking whether he was doing the same for her. She looked around the room. The photographs on the walls. The memories. The life she thought they were protecting. I need you to answer one question, she said. Grant looked at her. Did you love me while you were building a life with someone else? For the first time that night, he had no answer. And that silence told her everything. Camille walked toward the closet and opened the door. Grant watched, confused. What are you doing? He asked. She reached for a suitcase. Camille. She didn't respond. Where are you going? She finally looked back at him. Her eyes were hurt, but they were clear. Somewhere I don't have to convince someone to choose me. And for the first time in their marriage, Grant realized something terrifying. Camille wasn't threatening to leave. She had already decided. The next morning, Camille Richardson woke up before her alarm. For a few seconds, she forgot what happened the night before. She saw the sunlight coming through the bedroom curtains, heard the quiet hum of the house, and almost reached for Grant's side of the bed out of habit. Then reality came back. The bracelet. The messages. The look on his face when she asked if he still loved her while hiding another life. Camille sat up slowly and looked around the room they had decorated together. 8 years of memories were everywhere. The wedding photo on the nightstand. The painting they bought on their first anniversary. The little details that once made the house feel like home. Now they felt like reminders of a story she no longer recognized. She walked downstairs and found Grant sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked exhausted. For the first time in a long time, he looked unsure of himself. Can we talk? He asked. Camille poured herself a glass of water and stayed standing. We have been talking for years, Grant. I was just the only one being honest. He lowered his eyes. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes, Camille repeated. Her voice was calm, but there was pain behind every word. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying the wrong thing during an argument. What you did was a choice. Grant took a breath. I never wanted to hurt you. Camille looked at him carefully. But you did. The silence between them felt heavier than any fight they had ever had. Grant leaned forward. Camille, we were not happy. She looked away for a moment. That sentence hurt because it carried a piece of truth. They had not been the same lately. But she knew the difference between a struggling marriage and a person choosing to betray it. You know what hurts the most, she said. It is not Madison. It is not even the lies. Grant looked up. Then what? The fact that you decided our marriage was already over without giving me the chance to know there was a problem. Grant had no response. Because she was right. For months, he had been making decisions alone, while Camille was still fighting for a future they both promised to build. Later that afternoon, Camille met her best friend, Jasmine Carter, at a quiet coffee shop downtown. Jasmine had known Camille since college. She was one of the few people who could tell when Camille was pretending to be okay. You are not going back, are you? Jasmine asked softly. Camille looked out the window at people walking through the city. I do not know. Jasmine reached across the table. Camille. She paused. Yes, you do. Camille looked down at her coffee. I spent years trying to be the perfect wife. I thought if I loved him enough, supported him enough, and understood him enough, we would be fine. And what did he do? Jasmine asked. Camille swallowed. He made me feel like asking for honesty was asking for too much. That was the moment something changed. Camille was not sitting there planning revenge. She was not thinking about making Grant suffer. She was thinking about herself for the first time in years. That evening, she returned home and started organizing her things. Not everything. Not dramatically. Just what mattered. Her documents. Her personal belongings. The items that belonged to the woman she was before she became someone's wife. Grant watched from the doorway. You are really leaving. Camille zipped her suitcase and looked at him. I am leaving the version of me that kept accepting less than I deserved. Grant's expression softened. What about us? Camille looked at him for a long moment. I spent years protecting us, Grant. I cannot be the only person doing that. As she walked toward the door, Grant finally understood something he had refused to believe. Camille was not walking away because she stopped caring. She was walking away because she finally started caring about herself. 3 days after Camille Richardson walked out of the house she once called home, Grant Whitmore was still waiting for her to come back. He told himself she just needed time. He told himself she was hurt and emotional, and eventually she would remember everything they had built together. But what Grant did not understand was that Camille had not left because she wanted him to chase her. She left because she finally understood that she could not keep chasing someone who had already chosen to walk away. Camille stayed at a small furnished apartment across town. It was not as comfortable as the house she shared with Grant. The kitchen was smaller. The view from the window was nothing compared to the neighborhood she was used to. But for the first time in years, every decision she made belonged only to her. She sat at the small dining table with a notebook in front of her, writing down everything she needed to rebuild her life. Her finances, her business plans, her personal goals, the dream she had pushed aside while helping Grant build his empire. Her phone rang. It was her business partner, Olivia Bennett. Camille, I know this is not the best time, but I need to ask you something. Camille looked at the documents in front of her. What is it? Why are you still hiding your company? Camille paused. For years, Camille had kept her business success quiet. Not because she was ashamed. Because she wanted to know that someone loved her for who she was, not what she owned. Her consulting firm, Richardson Brand Strategies, had grown from a small project into a respected company with major clients across the country. But outside of a few trusted people, nobody knew she was the founder. Not even Grant. I think I was trying to protect the wrong thing, Camille said quietly. Olivia understood immediately. You spent years making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Camille looked down at the notebook. Those words stayed with her. Meanwhile, Grant's world was becoming more complicated. He invited Madison Blake to dinner, hoping their relationship would give him the comfort he thought he wanted. But instead of feeling peaceful, he felt like something was missing. Madison looked at him across the table. You are still thinking about Camille. Grant immediately shook his head. That is not true. Madison gave him a knowing look. Grant, you say her name differently. He looked away. Because deep down, he knew Madison was right. He missed the woman who knew him before the money, before the success, before the pressure. The woman who challenged him when everyone else agreed with him. The woman who cared about the person underneath the CEO title. The next week, Grant returned to the office and noticed something he had ignored for years. Many of the strategies that helped his company grow had come from Camille's advice. Ideas she shared during late nights. Solutions she offered during conversations. Connections she helped create. He had always considered her supportive. He never realized she was a partner in everything except the paperwork. That evening, Grant opened an old photo album. He stopped at a picture from their first year of marriage. Camille was laughing beside him, holding 2 coffee cups while they stood outside their first apartment. Back then, they had almost nothing, but they had each other. Grant stared at the picture and whispered, "How did I lose you?" Across town, Camille closed her laptop after finishing her first major presentation without Grant beside her. She looked at herself in the reflection of the dark screen. She was still hurt. She was still healing, but she was no longer waiting for someone else to decide her worth. And without knowing it, Camille was about to step into a chapter of her life that would make everyone who underestimated her finally see the woman she had always been. 6 weeks after leaving Grant Whitmore, Camille Richardson walked into a glass conference room in downtown Chicago and looked at a room full of people waiting for her to speak. A year ago, she would have been standing there as someone's wife. Someone standing beside a powerful man. Someone introduced as Grant Whitmore's wife before anyone mentioned her own achievements. But today was different. "Good morning," Camille said, placing her notes on the table. "I am Camille Richardson, founder of Richardson Brand Strategies." The room became quiet. Not because they did not know her, because many of them had never realized who she really was. For years, Camille had built her company quietly. She had helped businesses improve their image, create stronger marketing strategies, and connect with their customers. She had done the work without needing attention. But after walking away from her marriage, she finally understood something important. Staying invisible had not protected her heart. It had only allowed people to overlook her. After the meeting ended, Olivia Bennett walked beside her toward the elevator. "You know what I noticed today?" Olivia asked. Camille smiled slightly. "What? You did not apologize once for being successful." Camille laughed softly. "I guess I am still learning." "No," Olivia replied. "You are remembering." Across the city, Grant was facing a reality he never expected. His relationship with Madison was not the escape he imagined. The excitement had faded, and the differences between them became impossible to ignore. Madison wanted the image of success, the events, the attention, the lifestyle, but she did not understand the pressure, the responsibility, or the quiet moments when Grant needed someone who truly knew him. One evening, Grant sat alone in his office after everyone had left. He opened an old email from Camille that he had ignored months earlier. It was a simple message with suggestions for improving one of his company's projects. At the time, he had barely read it. Now he noticed every detail. She had studied the problem. She had found solutions. She had cared about his success, even while he was creating a world without her. Grant leaned back in his chair and whispered, "You were never just supporting me." The realization was painful because it was true. Camille had been his partner. He just had not treated her like one. A few days later, Grant saw Camille's name appear in a business article online. The headline described her company as one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region. He read the article twice. The woman he thought was simply his wife had built something extraordinary, and she had done it without him. Grant reached for his phone and stopped before calling. For the first time, he questioned his own intentions. Did he miss Camille because he loved her, or because he finally understood what he lost? Meanwhile, Camille received an invitation to a major business leadership event. Her company had been selected for recognition among rising brands. She stood in front of her closet that evening, choosing an outfit for an event that represented a new chapter. She looked at herself in the mirror and remembered the woman who once stood in that same reflection wondering why she was not enough. That woman was gone. But Camille knew healing did not mean forgetting. It meant no longer allowing someone else's choices to define her. The night of the event arrived. Camille stepped into the crowded ballroom with confidence. Cameras turned. Business leaders greeted her. And across the room, someone she never expected to see was watching. Grant Whitmore stood there, realizing the truth he had been avoiding. He had not lost a wife who needed him. He had lost a woman who had finally learned she could succeed without him. The ballroom was filled with conversations, laughter, and the quiet confidence of people who had spent years building their success. But Grant Whitmore heard none of it. His attention stayed on one person across the room, Camille Richardson. She was standing beside business leaders, speaking about her company, smiling naturally, and carrying herself with a confidence he had never seen before. Not because she had changed into someone else, because she had finally stopped hiding who she was. Grant watched as people approached her, asking for advice, congratulating her achievements. They did not see her as the woman behind a powerful man anymore. They saw her as a powerful woman on her own, and that realization hurt more than he expected. Grant. Madison Blake's voice pulled him back. Are you even listening? He looked at her. Sorry, I was just thinking. Madison followed his eyes across the room and immediately understood. You were still thinking about her. Grant did not answer, because denying it felt impossible. Later that evening, Grant finally approached Camille. He walked slowly, almost like he was unsure whether he had the right to stand in front of her. Camille. She turned around. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence carried everything they had never said. Congratulations, Grant said. Your company is incredible. Camille gave a polite smile. Thank you. It was a simple response, but it felt different from before. Before, Camille would have looked for warmth in his voice. She would have searched for signs that he still cared. Now, she simply accepted his words and nothing more. I did not know you built all of this, Grant said. Camille looked at him. You never asked. That sentence stayed with him, because it was true. Grant had spent years believing he knew everything about Camille. He knew her favorite coffee order. He knew the songs she liked. He knew how she organized their home. But he never truly knew her dreams, her goals, the woman she was becoming. I made mistakes, Grant said quietly. Camille looked away for a moment. Grant, you did not just make mistakes. You made choices. He nodded slowly. He wanted to argue. He wanted to explain. But for once, he understood that defending himself would only make things worse. I miss you, he admitted. Camille looked back at him. Do you miss me? Or do you miss having someone who believed in you? Grant opened his mouth, but no words came out, because that question reached deeper than he expected. Across the room, Olivia watched from a distance. She knew Camille well enough to recognize something important. Camille was not angry anymore. Anger meant someone still had control over your emotions. Camille had moved beyond that. A few days later, Grant found himself facing another difficult truth. His company was struggling with a major decision, and the person he would have normally called first was no longer beside him. He picked up his phone several times, but stopped every time. He remembered all the moments Camille had helped him, the advice she gave, the problems she solved, the encouragement she offered when nobody else believed in him. He finally understood that he had not just lost a marriage. He had lost his greatest supporter. Meanwhile, Camille continued building her future. She accepted a new partnership opportunity that could take her company to the next level. It was the kind of opportunity she once would have discussed with Grant first. But now, she trusted her own judgment. That night, she looked out at the city from her apartment window and smiled. She was not waiting for an apology. She was not waiting for Grant to understand her worth. She already knew it. But somewhere across the city, Grant was beginning to understand the hardest lesson of his life. Losing Camille was not the consequence of one bad decision. It was the result of every moment he failed to see the woman standing beside him. Grant Whitmore had spent years believing he was always in control. He built companies. He made difficult decisions. He knew how to negotiate, how to win, and how to make people believe in his vision. But now, sitting alone in his office late at night, he was facing the one thing he could not fix with money or strategy. He had lost Camille Richardson, and for the first time, he understood that losing her was not just losing a relationship. It was losing the person who made him better. The following weeks were harder than Grant expected. His company was facing challenges that required careful decisions, and the people around him noticed something different. The confident CEO who always had an answer was suddenly quieter. During a meeting, one of his executives placed a report on the table. Grant, we need a new approach. The old strategy is not working anymore. Grant looked at the numbers and remembered something. Camille had warned him about this exact problem months earlier. She had seen the risks before anyone else. At the time, he had smiled and told her, "You worry too much." Now, he was staring at the consequences of not listening. After the meeting ended, Grant stayed behind. He opened his old messages with Camille and scrolled through years of conversations. He saw all the moments he had missed. The times she asked him to talk. The times she wanted to share her own ideas. The times he responded with, "Can we do this later? I have a lot going on." He had convinced himself that Camille would always be there. He thought love meant someone would keep waiting. He never considered that one day she would stop. Meanwhile, Camille was moving forward. Her company had just secured a major partnership that would expand her work into several new markets. Olivia Bennett walked into her office holding a folder and smiling. "You realize what just happened, right?" Camille looked up from her desk. "We signed a great partnership?" Olivia shook her head. "No. You finally stopped asking yourself if you were good enough." Camille smiled softly. The old Camille would have celebrated the success, but immediately wondered how Grant would react. Would he be proud? Would he notice? Would he finally see her? Now, those questions did not control her anymore. But healing did not mean she forgot everything. Some nights, she still remembered the early years of her marriage. The small apartment they shared. The dreams they talked about. The promises they made when they had nothing but hope. The hardest part was accepting that the person she loved had become someone she could no longer trust. One afternoon, Camille received a message from Grant. "Can we talk? Not to fix anything. I just want to apologize properly." She stared at the screen for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore it. Another part of her knew that avoiding the past would not erase it. She agreed to meet him at a quiet restaurant downtown. When Grant arrived, he looked different. Not because of his clothes or his appearance. Because he looked like someone who had finally stopped making excuses. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. Camille nodded. "I am listening." Grant took a breath. "I spent a long time thinking I lost you because of one mistake. But that is not true." Camille watched him carefully. "Then what is true?" He looked down. "I lost you because I stopped appreciating you long before you left." For the first time, Camille saw something she had wanted for months. Not guilt. Not fear. Real understanding. But understanding was only the beginning. Camille had learned that words were easy. Actions were what mattered. As they sat across from each other, both of them realized something important. Their old relationship was gone. The question was whether anything honest could ever grow from what remained. For the first time in months, Grant Whitmore stopped trying to convince Camille Richardson to come back. He stopped sending long messages. He stopped making promises he was not sure he could keep. Instead, he started doing something much harder. He started looking honestly at the man he had become. A few days after their conversation, Grant sat in his office with a notebook in front of him. It was something he had never done before. He wrote down every moment he remembered hurting Camille. Not just the obvious ones. The small ones. The times he dismissed her opinions. The times he canceled plans because work came first. The times he assumed she would always understand because she always had before. For years, Grant thought Camille's patience meant everything was fine. He never realized her patience was slowly becoming exhaustion. Meanwhile, Camille continued building the life she had started creating for herself. Her company was growing quickly, but she was careful not to let success become another way to avoid healing. One evening, Olivia joined her for dinner at a small restaurant near Camille's apartment. "You know, I have to ask you something," Olivia said. Camille smiled. "That usually means trouble." Olivia laughed. "Are you considering giving Grant another chance?" Camille looked down at her glass of water and thought carefully. "I do not know." Olivia studied her expression. "That answer sounds different than before." Camille nodded. "Before, I was asking if he still loved me. Now I am asking if I can trust him." That was the difference. Camille was no longer looking for proof that she mattered. She already knew she did. The question was whether Grant could become someone safe enough to let into her life again. A week later, Grant asked Camille to meet him. This time, he did not choose an expensive restaurant or a place connected to their old memories. He chose a quiet coffee shop where they could simply talk. When Camille arrived, Grant stood up. "Thank you for coming." She nodded. "You said you wanted to apologize." Grant took a moment before speaking. "I am sorry for making you feel like you had to compete for my attention. I am sorry for making you question yourself when I was the one who made the wrong choices." Camille listened quietly. "I spent a long time telling myself that I was unhappy because we changed," Grant continued. "But the truth is, I stopped putting effort into protecting what we had." His voice became softer. "You were always there for me, and I acted like that meant you always would be." Camille looked at him. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" Grant waited. "It was not losing you. It was realizing you were hurting while I was still telling myself I was a good husband." Those words stayed between them, because they were the first words from Grant that did not ask Camille to comfort him. He was finally taking responsibility. "I cannot promise that everything will be fixed," Grant said. "I know I do not get to ask for that." Camille nodded slowly. You are right. She paused. Because trust is not rebuilt with one conversation. Grant accepted that answer. And that surprised Camille. The old Grant would have tried to negotiate. He would have wanted a timeline, a guarantee, a way to control the outcome. This time, he simply listened. Over the next few weeks, Grant began showing change through actions. He gave Camille space. He respected her boundaries. He stopped trying to prove he deserved forgiveness and started trying to become someone worthy of it. Camille noticed the difference, but she remained careful. She had spent too many years ignoring her own feelings to suddenly ignore them again. One night, as she looked through photos from her company's latest event, she saw a picture of herself standing confidently on stage. She remembered the woman she used to be, the woman who waited for someone else to choose her. She smiled because she finally understood something important. Forgiveness was possible, but forgetting who she became without him was impossible. And that was the one thing Grant could never take away from her again. 3 months had passed since Camille Richardson and Grant Whitmore started having honest conversations again. But this time, something was different. They were no longer pretending that everything could return to the way it was before. They both knew the old version of their relationship was gone. The question was whether they could build something new without repeating the same mistakes. Camille noticed the changes in small moments. Grant no longer interrupted when she spoke. He no longer tried to explain away her feelings. When she said something hurt her, he listened instead of defending himself. It was unfamiliar, because for years, Camille had been preparing for arguments before they even happened. Now, she was learning what it felt like to be heard. One afternoon, Camille and Grant met at a park near the lake. It was the same place where they used to walk together when they were first married. The memories were there, but they felt different. I used to think getting you back was the goal, Grant said as they walked slowly. Camille looked at him. And now? He took a breath. Now I think becoming someone who deserves your trust is the goal. Camille stayed quiet for a moment. That answer mattered because it was not about winning. It was not about getting his old life back. It was about understanding what he had damaged. But healing was not a straight line. There were still difficult days. There were moments when Camille remembered the nights she felt alone in her own marriage. There were moments when she questioned whether forgiveness meant opening the door to being hurt again. One evening, she sat with Olivia in her office after everyone had left. The city lights reflected through the windows. You know what scares me? Camille asked. Olivia looked up from her laptop. What? That I might forgive him and forget how hard it was to find myself again. Olivia leaned back in her chair. Camille, forgiving someone does not mean giving them permission to erase your growth. Those words stayed with her. Because Camille finally understood that choosing peace did not mean ignoring what happened. It meant refusing to let pain control her future. Meanwhile, Grant faced his own difficult moment. Madison reached out unexpectedly. She wanted to talk about everything that happened between them. Grant agreed, but the conversation was not what she expected. I think we both wanted something that was not real, Madison admitted. Grant nodded. I was looking for an escape instead of dealing with my problems. For the first time, he stopped blaming circumstances. He stopped blaming stress. He stopped blaming the distance in his marriage. He accepted that his choices belonged to him. Later that week, Grant attended one of Camille's company events. He stood in the crowd and watched her speak about leadership, confidence, and creating opportunities for others. He saw the respect people had for her. Not because she was connected to him, because she had earned it. After the event, Grant approached her. You were amazing tonight. Camille smiled. Thank you. He hesitated before continuing. I know I cannot ask you to forget what happened. Camille looked at him. Good. Because I do not want to forget. Grant nodded. I just hope one day you can remember us without only remembering the pain. Camille looked at the man standing in front of her. The man who had once taken her love for granted. The man who was finally learning that love was not something you owned. It was something you protected. Maybe, she said softly. But if there is ever an us again, it cannot be the old us. Grant understood. Because the woman standing before him was not the same woman who packed her bags months ago. She was stronger, more confident, more complete. And for the first time, Grant was not trying to bring her back to who she was. He was learning to respect who she had become. 1 year after Camille Richardson walked away from the marriage that nearly broke her, she stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people and looked out at a room full of faces. Entrepreneurs, leaders, young women hoping to build something of their own. The old Camille would have been nervous. She would have wondered if she belonged there. She would have looked for someone else's approval before believing in herself. But that woman was no longer standing on that stage. Success is not about proving people wrong, Camille said into the microphone. It is about becoming the person you were always meant to be. The room filled with applause. But the most important thing was not the applause. It was the peace she felt inside. After the event, Camille stepped outside and found Grant Whitmore waiting nearby. He was not there with flowers. He was not there with a dramatic speech. He simply stood there, giving her the choice to walk away if she wanted. "You did great tonight," he said. Camille smiled. "Thank you." They stood quietly for a moment, both remembering how different things used to be. "I have been thinking," Grant said, "about everything." Camille looked at him. "That sounds dangerous." He laughed softly. "Maybe it is." Then his expression became serious. "I used to think losing you was the worst thing that happened to me. But now I realize losing you forced me to face the person I had become." Camille listened carefully. "I spent years chasing success because I thought winning meant having everything. But I had everything already, and I was too distracted to see it." Those words were different from the apologies he gave before. Because this time, he was not asking for anything. He was simply telling the truth. "Grant," Camille said gently, "I need you to understand something. I do not want the old life back." He nodded. "I know. The woman who stayed with you no matter what does not exist anymore." Grant looked at her and smiled slightly. "Good." Camille raised an eyebrow. "Good." "Yes," he said, "because she deserved better than what I gave her. And the woman standing here now deserves someone who sees her completely." For a moment, Camille said nothing. She had imagined this conversation many times. She thought she would feel anger. She thought she would want him to hurt the way she hurt. But instead, she felt something unexpected. Peace. Over time, Camille and Grant slowly rebuilt a connection based on honesty and respect. They did not pretend the past never happened. They did not erase the mistakes. They learned from them. Their relationship, if it continued, would not be built on old promises. It would be built on new choices made every day. Camille never forgot the night she packed her bags. She never forgot the pain of realizing the person she trusted had broken that trust. But she also never forgot what came after. The quiet moments when she discovered her own strength. The days when she learned she could stand alone. The journey that showed her she was never valuable because someone chose her. She was valuable because she always was. Years later, when people asked Camille about the hardest moment of her life, she never talked about the betrayal first. She talked about the moment she finally chose herself. Because sometimes losing someone is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the moment your real story begins. And sometimes the greatest victory is not watching someone regret losing you. It is reaching a place where you no longer need them to realize your worth.